If you want to, go ahead and turn over to Daniel chapter 3. While you're turning, I want to read a couple of verses that kind of go along with the sermon this morning from 1 Peter. In 4 and 12, he said, "Beloved, think it is not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you." We're going to face trials in life. It's just the way it is. In 1 Peter 1, verse 6 and 7, "Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness, through manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though ye tried with fire, might be found unto praise." I wrote real small here. "Might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ." Peter's talking about the trials we're going to face in life and how he's comparing it to the purifying process with gold. People would take the gold, the form it was in, they would burn it. It'd have to go through a fiery trial, completely lose its shape, but it lost all the impurities it had in it. And today in Daniel 3, we're going to talk about some people who went through a fire. It's a lot different looking at 4 different views here than I'm used to. I've got a note here. Faith that endures fire is a faith that can be trusted. Can our faith handle fire? How many times do we go through life waiting on a prayer to be answered, or we're going along one day and something happens and we lose something important to us? Can our faith handle that? Our faith in God? In Daniel chapter 3, basically what's happened up to this point is King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah. He decided that the best thing to do was to take their smartest people, bring them in, and basically brainwash them. He's going to put them in their culture for 3 or 4 years before he puts them in charge of their people, because that's who they'll listen to. The people of Judah will listen to people from Judah, but he doesn't want them there until they're brainwashed. So he's got 3 specific people here that he's planning on making leaders: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'll start reading now at verse 1 of chapter 3. "Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon." He's got a big gold image. If you look it up, it's 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide. It's something you can see from a long ways around, and something he's really proud of. And it starts repeating itself a few times here, so you'll have to bear with me. "Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. The princes, the governors, and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So basically what we've got is the king says, look at how great this image is, we're all going to worship it every chance we get. And if you don't worship it like I say, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace and you're going to die. You're going to listen to what I say or you are going to die. Which is a problem for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because in Exodus 20 and 3, 10 Commandments clearly says, "Thou shalt have no other God before me." The king had set up. Wherefore, at the time the certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews, they spake and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do ye not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God that shall deliver you out of my hands? I want to stop right there and say, we are going to face trials in our life. And while we're facing those trials, we have to be careful. Because there are people watching us, waiting for us to do something wrong, so they can run off and tell other people. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they got a lot of power that other people want. And they're all watching, and as soon as they get a chance, they run straight to the king and say, these guys aren't listening to you. You got to do something about them. Knowing that if he does something about them, they get the power. Now, verse 15, the king makes it very clear. Tells them straight to their face. All you've got to do is when you hear the music, you bow down. If you don't, you're going in the furnace. My question is, what do you do? If it's me, I'm going to try to rationalize something in my mind here. I'm going to be thinking, okay, well, maybe if I bow down and look like I'm worshiping, that'll be enough, right? Maybe we can bow down just this once and then ask for forgiveness afterward because we serve a forgiving God. Or maybe it's that we're in a foreign land and we just got to go along with their customs so we don't offend them. Nobody wants to offend anybody now, right? I saw on Facebook the other day, it says we're so careful in this country not to offend anyone except for God. This isn't as bad as other things. Look at what my ancestors did. They put idols in the temple of God. I'm just going to fall down before this big 90-foot statue. Or maybe something else they thought, if something happens to us, who's going to take care of our people? We're the ones in charge. There's all kinds of things people think about trying to rationalize this because they know they're facing death. But Billy Graham said something one time. I wanted to give you a quote. He said, once you rationalize once, it makes it easier and easier to rationalize again. And before you know it, you're living a life full of compromise. One compromise leads to another, and then to another, until your life is full of compromises. So, what should we do? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, go. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, another line there, answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. They make it very clear. This is how we feel. I don't care what you say to us. This is the way it is. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Remember, the king just a minute ago said, who's the God who's going to save you? Who can save you from me? And they look right back into his face and say, our God can save us. Our God will save us. A lot of people stop there. Our God's going to save us. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went on because the next few words are important. But if not, What if it doesn't happen the way we plan? But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods and worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They know that their God can save them, if he wants to. But they also know that they can't compromise just in case. Then Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury, and the form of his visage had changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it wont to be heated. What should we do when our faith is tested? They look him in the eyes and say, we trust God. Nebuchadnezzar looks back at him and says, turn the heat up. Let's see how you respond now. Then these men were bound in coats, and he commanded the most mighty men that were in the army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and they were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So what do we do when we're tested with fire? The first thing that we need to learn from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is we need to obey God's commands instead of the human expectations. The world is full of human expectations. This right here, though, is the only thing we need to listen to. It tells us how to handle every situation we'll face in life. The next thing we need to do, believe the truth instead of the facts. I spent a lot of time thinking about that because to me, facts and truth go hand in hand. Believe the truth. Believe what God's told you. God can deliver you. The facts, when you look at things, they look really bad. The facts here are these three men are getting thrown into a fire, tied up, nothing they can do, and it's hotter than it's ever been. So hot that it killed the strongest men in the army when they were trying to throw them in. The third thing's the most important thing. Don't just believe in God, believe God. It's real easy to say, I believe in God. There's a God and he can take care of me. The question is, do you say, I believe God will take care of me? And now we get to the actual good news. I've been told before, I preach a lot on we're facing trials. And that's just the way it's going to be. It is. Now I'll try to focus on the encouraging part. We're not alone in our trials. Verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast three men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. That verse there is probably enough for a sermon for my dad. I'm not that good. I don't have as many stories. I'm not as long-winded. Don't tell him I said that. We have to remember, though, during our fiery trials, Joey's going to tell him I said that. During our fiery trials, we have to remember that God's with us. I found another quote. I like Billy Graham. There's another quote. Means a lot. It helps me. Maybe it'll help some of you. You will meet God in the fire long before you meet him in the sky. Again, I preach a lot on going through trials. Just the way life is. But God's there with us. Now, who is the God that shall deliver you out of my hands? The words of the king, right? This is the God that can save them. They knew it before they went into the fire that God could save them. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. And me, I'm a little bit of a smart aleck. I probably would have invited him in instead of telling him now. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and counselors, being gathered together, saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was there a hair on their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants and trusted in him, and had changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any other God except their own God. That's where I'm going to stop this morning, because that's what's important. God took these three men that were supposed to be brainwashed into a culture. They had to conform to their surroundings, is what they were told. And he showed with these three men that you don't have to conform. You don't have to accept the compromises the world wants you to. Jesus said in Matthew 16:24 and 25, Then said Jesus unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. I get a song leader and piano player to come forward while I close. I told you I'm not long-winded this year. You're going to be faced with trials. They're going to be hard. It's easy to say that you have faith. The question is it a faith of action and not just faith of words? What do we do when we're tested? One last comment I've got here. Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book about his experience in the concentration camps in World War II. He lost all of his family except for his sister, and you'd think that'd really depress a man. But people who met him said he was really fun to talk to. He was encouraging. In his book, the last thing I want to tell you this morning, the quote is, it doesn't matter what cell you're in life, if the Son of God is in there with you, you'll be okay.